Most of the important things in the world have been accomplished by people who have kept on trying when there seemed to be no hope at all. With this beautiful thought, a very good morning to all my dear students. I, Shreya Jadhav, welcome you all to my e learning channel. And today we are going to learn English Grade 11, Unit 1, The Portrait of a Lady, and it is written by Khushwant Singh. So, before starting the reading and explanation of the chapter, let us know something about the author. Khushwant Singh, born on 2nd February 1915, died on 20th March 2014. Khushwant Singh was an Indian author, lawyer, diplomat, journalist, and politician. His experience in the 1947 partition of India inspired him to write Train to Pakistan in the year 1956, which was made into a film in the year 1998, which became his most well known novel. So, now let us proceed. Introduction for answers. Dear students, whenever you write down your question answers, always remember that you are supposed to start your answer with introduction. This creates a good impact on the paper checker. Prose, that is the portrait of lady. Author's name, that is Khushwant Singh. Genre, that is short story. And summary. The portrait of a lady is the story of the author. He describes his relationship with his grandmother over the years. So now let us begin the reading and explanation of the chapter. Chapter 1, The Portrait of a Lady by Khushwant Singh. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. People said that she had once been young and pretty, and had even had a husband. But that was hard to believe. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. So, over here in the beginning, the author is trying to tell us about his grandmother. Like she was also, means he was also having a grandmother who was like everybody other's grandmother, but she was really very old. She was old and wrinkled, and author is trying to say that uh, from past 20 years, whenever he has seen his grandmother, there was always an image that she looked the same. There was no change in her. And even people used to tell that her grandmother was really very pretty and beautiful. But it was really very difficult for the author to believe it. And they also told that she was also having a husband. But for the author, it was a bit difficult to digest and hard to believe. Now, the author is trying to put forward that now he is giving us a little bit description about his grandfather, that his portrait or a picture has been hung in the drawing room. He is wearing a big turban and loose fitting clothes, and he is having a long white beard which is covering the best part of his chest, and he looked as if he was hundreds of years. He did not look the sort of a person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. Okay, so over here the description that his grandfather looked really very old. As my grandmother, being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child that seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophet she used to tell us. So, over here, we always have our grandmothers who used to tell us stories when they were child, how they used to play, what games they used to play, and what work they used to do. So, over here, the author is also getting an opportunity of how uh, the grandmother used to spend her childhood when she was in her teenage or in her young days. But the author used to listen to them like a fairy tale or a fable. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Now, after a certain age, old people bend, they have a hingeback. So, over here, the same situation is there, that the grandmother is short in height, she is a bit fat, and she is slightly bent. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain that she had been as we had known her, old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She would never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hopped about the house in spotless white, with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop, and the other telling the beads of the rosary. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the winter landscape in the mountains, an escape, an expanse of pure white serenity, breathing peace and contentment. So, over here, the writer is trying to tell that I have known him, means the writer have known the grandmother from past 20 years. But it is very difficult that she cannot age more now. It is difficult for the writer to believe that she could be pretty. But the writer is telling that for sure she might not be pretty, but she is a beautiful person. Now, dear students, there is difference between pretty and beautiful. Pretty is, we can say, the outer beauty, but beautiful means the person is beautiful inside out. And over here, the writer is trying to tell that she is beautiful in every manner, that she always hops down in the home, and moreover to that, one of her hand is always on the waist. She is trying to balance herself, and in other hand, she is having bits of rosary where she is continuously chanting the name, and the prayers are continuously going on, and she is always in an inaudible prayer. Continuously it is going on, whether it is day, night, afternoon, whatever the time of day it may be, but that inaudible prayer is continuously on, and this makes the grandmother more beautiful. And she looks like a winter's landscape in the mountains, that she is so pure, so calm, and with lots of serenity. She is over there, breathing in peace and contentment. My grandmother and I were good friends. My parents left me with her when they went to live in the city, and we were constantly together. She used to wake me up in the morning and get me ready for school. She said her morning prayer in a monotonous sing song while she bathed me and dressed me, in the hope that I would listen and get to know it by heart. I listened because I loved her voice, but never bothered to learn it. Then she would fetch my wooden slate, which she had already washed and plastered with a yellow chalk, a tiny earthen ink pot, and a red pen. Tie them all in a bundle and hand it to me. After a breakfast of thick stale chapati with a little butter and sugar spread on it, we went to school. She carried several stale chapatis with her for village dogs. So now we are going to have an inside look for the grandmother and the author when author was really very young. Author's parents left him with his grandmother and they shifted to city for the better future. So usually he has spent most of his childhood with his grandmother. Every day she would wake him up in the morning, get him ready for the school, and while dressing him up, she would say prayers in a monotonous way, so that in a way that he would learn somehow. But the author would never pay attention to the words and he never bothered to learn it by heart. He only loved the grandmother's voice. And moreover to that, she would get ready the slate so that she could give it to the author. And both of them would have their breakfast of stale chapati with no little butter and sugar on it, and they would go to the school. Even grandmother used to carry several other stale chapatis for the village dogs. My grandmother always went to school with me because the school was attached to the temple. The priest taught us the alphabet and the morning prayer, while the children sat in a row on either side of veranda singing the alphabet or prayer in a chorus. My grandmother sat inside reading the scriptures. When we both had finished, we would walk back together. This time the village dogs would meet us at the temple door. They followed us to our home, growling and fighting with each other for the chapatis we threw to them. So here grandmother would accompany the author to the school, and at that time duration the school and the temple were near to each other. Now the priest used to teach them alphabets and morning prayer. The children used to sit in a row and in one side of the veranda singing the alphabets and the prayers, and grandmother sitting over there, and she used to read scriptures. When both of them were finished, at that time when they used to return home, the village dogs would be waiting for them at the door, and they would not growl and fight with each other for the chapatis that they threw. When my parents were comfortably settled in the city, they sent for us, means they called them. That was the turning point in our friendship. Although we shared the same room, my grandmother no longer came to school with me. I used to go to an English school in a motor bus. There were no dogs in the street, and she took to feeding sparrows in the courtyard of our city house. So now when the parents settled comfortably in the city, they called the grandmother and the author to the town, to the city. And at that time duration, that was the changing point in their life, in their friendship. Eventually they used to stay in the same room, but still now grandmother would not come to leave him because he used to go in an English medium school, and moreover to that he used to go through motor bus. And the other thing was that now she was not able to feed dogs over there, so she started feeding sparrows in the courtyard in the new house. As the years rolled by, we saw less of each other. For some time she continued to wake me up and get me ready for school. When I came back, she would ask me what the teacher had taught me. I would tell her English words and little things of Western science and learning. The law of gravity, Archimedes' principle, the world being round, etc. This made her unhappy. She could not help me with my lessons. She did not believe in the things they taught at English school and was distressed that there was no teaching about God and scriptures. One day I announced that we were being given music lessons. She was very disturbed. To her, music had a lewd association. It was the monopoly of heralds and beggars and not meant for gentle folk. She said nothing, but her silence meant disapproval. She rarely talked to me after that. So somehow grandmother used to keep account of about the author. She used to ask what they have done at the school. Now the author would not give some sort of reply in English about the subject. This made grandmother unhappy. Why? Because in the school no teaching about the God and the scriptures were given. And when one day the author told that they were given music lessons, at that time she didn't liked it at all. Why? Because music, she thought like that music is associated with no beggars class people. The good people or good level of people do not sing or play music. It is not for them. And with listening to this thing, the connection between grandmother and the author slowly and gradually reduced. She didn't say about anything, but her silence was a disapproval. And after that, she rarely talked with him. I went up to university. I was given a room of my own. The common link of friendship was snapped. My grandmother accepted her shulkation of resignation. She rarely left her spinning wheel to talk to anyone. From sunrise to sunset, she sat by her wheel, spinning and reciting prayers. Only in the afternoon she relaxed for a while to feed the sparrows. While she sat in the veranda, breaking the bread into little bites, hundreds of little birds collected round her, creating a veritable bedlam of chirping. Some came and perched on her legs, others on her shoulders. Some even sat on her head. She smiled, but never shooed them away. It used to be the happiest half an hour of the day for her. So now the author was grown up, he went to university, and now he had got his separate room. So that common link of friendship between them was taken away, was snapped. Moreover to that, now grandmother has also accepted her resignation, that now she is not supposed to interfere in the life of the author because he has become a grown child. She would not continuously from morning till evening, she would not just spin her wheel and she would recite prayers. She would relax in the afternoon, and while relaxing she would feed the sparrows. She would sit in the veranda breaking those bread into little pieces, and hundreds of little birds were collected in the veranda. Some of them used to sit on the legs, some of them would sit on the shoulders, even few came and sit on the head. And the grandmother would never refuse. Okay, she would never shoo them away, make them fly away, and it is considered as that the best half an hour of her day. When I decided to go abroad for further studies, I was sure my grandmother would be upset. I would be away for 5 years, and at her age, one could never tell. But my grandmother could. She was not even sentimental. She came to leave me at railway station but did not talk or show any emotion. Her lips moved in prayer, her mind was lost in prayer. Her fingers were busy telling the beads of rosary. Silently she kissed my forehead, and when I left, I cherished the moist imprint as perhaps the last sign of physical contact between us. So, here, after completing his university, he went for further studies to abroad, and at that time, he knew that his grandmother might be upset, but she didn't had any sort of feelings and sentiments. Although she came to leave him, but she was continuously in her prayer. She didn't show any sort of emotion. She was lost in her prayer and she was continuously busy in telling the beads of her rosary. She silently kissed her, and that was the last physical sign between the author and the grandmother. But that was not so. After 5 years, I came back home and was met by her at the station. She did not look a day older. She still had no time for words. And while she clasped me in her arms, I could hear her reciting her prayer. Even on the first day of my arrival, her happiest moments were with her sparrows, whom she fed longer with and with frivolous rebooks. Even when the writer returned after 5 years, she was continuously reciting the prayers and she didn't look at all a day older. But even on the first day of the writer's arrival, her happiest moment was feeding the sparrows. And this time she was in a frivolous rebukes, means in a playful scolding. She spent a bit longer time with the sparrows. In the evening, a change came over her. She did not pray. She collected the women of the neighborhood, got an old drum, and started to sing. For several hours, she thumped the sagging skins of dilapidated drum. It means that the old worn out sides of the drum and sang of the homecoming of warriors. We had to pursue her to stop, to avoid overstraining. That was the first time since I had known her that she did not pray. Now a condition came that after feeding the sparrows in the afternoon, that was first time in the evening that she didn't prayed. But on the other hand, she called the neighborhood women to play the drum and singing. And after a certain time duration, the family members had to stop her to avoid overstraining herself. And she was now singing the songs of homecoming of the warriors apart from prayers. The next morning, she was taken ill. It was a mild fever, and the doctor told us that it would go. But my grandmother thought differently. She told us that her end was near. She said that since only a few hours before her close of the last chapter of her life, she had omitted to pray. She was not going to waste any more time talking to us. We protested, but she ignored our protests. She lay peacefully in bed, praying and telling her beads. Even before we would suspect, her lips stopped moving and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A peaceful pallor spread on her face, and we knew that she was dead. Now, in the previous evening, as she overstrained herself a lot, the next morning she was ill. They called up for the doctor. The doctor told that it is just a mild fever, she'll be well soon. But the mindset of grandmother was different. She told that now this is her end. or the last chapter of her life. And just now she didn't want to talk to any of the person. She didn't want to waste a single minute of it, and just she wanted to do was just to pray. And she told that now don't waste her time, and she ignored all the protest, and she was laying down over there peacefully in the bed. She was praying, and before the family members could even suspect, her lips stopped moving and her fingers were lifeless. And a peaceful pallor means a pale body, and everywhere a paleness on her face and body was there. And soon they came to know that she was dead. We lifted her off the bed and, as is customary, laid her on the ground and covered her with red shroud. After a few hours of mourning, we left her alone to make arrangements for her funeral. In the evening, we went to her room with a crude stretcher to take her to be cremated. The sun was setting and had lit her room and veranda with a blaze of golden light. We stopped halfway in the courtyard, all over the veranda, in her room, right up to where she lay dead and stiff, wrapped in a red shroud. Thousands of sparrows sat scattered on the floor. There was no chirping. We felt sorry for the birds, and my mother fetched some bread for them. She broke it into little pieces the way my grandmother used to do and threw it to them. The sparrows took no notice of the bird. When we carried my grandmother's corpse off, they flew away quietly. Next morning, the sweeper swept the breadcrumbs into the dust. So, here, when the narrator's grandmother died, the sparrows came in large number and they sat near her body. They didn't chirp but sat there silently. When the narrator's mother brought some bread and broke into little pieces, like the grandmother used to do, but the sparrows didn't touch the crumbs. When grandmother's body was taken for cremation, they flew away quietly. And in the next morning, those crumbs were swept away. In this way, the sparrows mourned the death of their beloved friend, that was the grandmother. This is all about the explanation of the chapter. I hope you liked it. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. If you have any doubt or queries, you can comment down in the comment section. Thank you.